Welcome to a time of holy human stuff. My name is Heather Marie Elkins, and today we are going to consider from there to here, from here to there, the way funny things, holy things, are everywhere. And I wanted to start with a book. And it's a very first kind of book. This is the kind of book you read when you are just learning. In fact, this kind of book is perhaps the first book you've learned to read. One fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish. But it clearly says, and I am reading it to you, I can read it all by myself. So, at this moment, we're all beginners. And if you remember this, you might just say it along with me. One fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish, black fish, old fish, new fish. This one has a little star, and this one has a little car. Say, what a lot of fish there are. Yes, some are red, and some are blue, and some are old, and some are new. Some are sad, and some are glad, and some are very, very bad. Why are they sad and glad and bad? I don't know. Go ask your dad. Some are thin. Oh my goodness, this book is so old. It's been read so many times. We have to be very careful. And some are fat. The fat one has a yellow hat from there to here, from here to there. Funny things are everywhere. So, we have just read a book, all by ourselves. And the reflection I'd like to make today, and the connections I'm offering you to consider today, is the relationship between how I read, how you know how to read, and a very interesting creature that some of you eat if you go out to a restaurant and order calamari, and that is squid. Now, a squid is a very elusive animal, not from human standpoint particularly beautiful, unless you love things that know how to change color and in fact can light up almost enough to read by, and when they need to escape will squirt ink and cloud your vision and disappear. So if that appeals to you, then perhaps you are a friend of squid. And we have here one of the ancestors. This is a plate that on occasion I use for communion that reminds us that we are not the first who came out of the waters into being. So this is the ancestor of squid. And the ancestor, there was a common ancestor that just recently was discovered between squid and octopus. And where those things came from, they didn't know. They guessed they had a common ancestor. But the common ancestor has just been discovered, not like this, in a fossil form, older, further back. They've checked DNA. And about 160 million years ago, these different cephalopods began to diverge. There was great change going on in the environment then, and they figured out how to survive by adapting. Well, that still brings us back to the question of what's the connection between one fish, two fish, reading a plate of fossilized ancestor to the squid, and a book. Well, here's another book called Proust and the Squid. And it's a story in science of the reading brain. And it may come as a surprise to you, as it was to me, that reading, the ability to read, is not hardwired. It is a learned skill. There may come a time when humans will not know how to read because we have forgotten the links that make reading possible. And in this book, there's a little piece of history that links us to this ancestor plate. In the 1950s, scientists were looking for ways to discover how the human brain worked. And what came to hand, handily, was the lowly squid, the very shy squid. So scientists in the 1950s began to study how neurons in our brain fire and transmit to each other, and in some cases, how neurons repair and compensate when something goes amiss. So we began to discover how our brain worked by sharing some of those studies, being taught by the lowly shy squid, studying its brain and how it, in fact, processed. In reading this and considering this, I stumbled onto this recognition that this process of reading is really complicated. It is not to be taken for granted. And if I just read a section of what needs to go on when you read, it might give you just a glimpse of what goes on. And this is what you would call, or is called, the alphabet principle. This means when you read, as I read, you engage in an array of mental and cognitive processes. You have to have attention, memory, and visual. You have to have auditory and linguistic processes, all of them linked, all of them active. Your brain's attentional and executive systems begin to plan how to read, whether it is as complex as reading Proust or Dr. Seuss. Your brain has to pattern this and think this out. Your visual system begins to act, and it swoops across the page, according to this author. It takes the letter shapes and the word forms and the common phrases, and they turn it into a system that then begins to communicate sounds to you. Speaking of sounds, have you noticed any? Those are the songs of whales, also in the neighborhood of squid. These are the sounds of whales who, although they apparently have never learned to read, certainly know how to communicate. So the sounds that they are sending to each other make sense to whales. Just as when you read a letter, it begins to propose a sound in your own mind. It begins to communicate between your eyes and your brain. A sound begins to be formed. And without a single moment of conscious awareness, you apply rules about the sounds of letters, and you take many steps to do that, but you don't think about them at all. If, like this child's book insists, you can read it all by yourself. You don't think about it once you've learned. So this is what the alphabet principle is. And it's very complex. For example, if you run across the word bug and you read bug, you could think of those crawly things that you hope don't get close to you. Or your brain can figure out whether or not we're talking about spies or a Volkswagen, a particular kind of automobile, or something that's gotten wrong with your computer system, you've got bugs in it, or if you're really sick and you have the flu bug. So your brain, though it has the sound and it sees those 3 letters, still has choices it has to make. All of that extraordinary neural programming that goes on to be able to understand what the word bug means, like that might really bug you, a completely other meaning. So the complexities of both a famous master of literature, Proust, Dr. Seuss, ancestor to the squid, the sound of whale songs. What connects them? What connects them? Well, we do. We do because we have been gifted with the ability to do that. The same ability that gives us this to read gives us the ability to read the Psalms. Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Break forth into joyous song and sing praises. Aren't the whales doing that? Let the sea roar and all that fill it, in the world and those who live in it. Let the floods clap their hands. Let the hills sing together for joy at the presence of the Holy One. For God is coming to judge the earth. God will judge the earth with righteousness and people with equity. So, if that is the truth, not only during Advent, but any season of our lives lived in the awareness of in whose presence we live and move and have our being, with the ancestors of the squid and the songs of the whale, and those who write books for either children or scientists. What is the message? God will judge the world with righteousness. So we need to be very sure that the way in which we inhabit this world, filled with squid and whales and children, that we live it in such a way as we do not harm to the place where extinction is the only print left to read. We have to be very, very sure, as Dr. Seuss says, that we do not become like the giant squid once were assumed to be monsters of the deep, that we do not, in fact, become the monsters, filling the universe as those who are very, very bad. There's much to be learned from the very, very simple things, and much to celebrate that in this world we are not alone.